Have you ever stared into the flickering flames of a campfire and felt the darkness creeping just beyond the glow? It's out there, watching, waiting, cloaked in shadows. Tonight, I'll share 5 chilling campfire tales that are sure to haunt your dreams and make you think twice before stepping into the woods. Let's begin. Story 1. The Whistler in the Woods. It all began when a group of hikers decided to camp deep in the forest. The day had been filled with laughter and exploration, but as night fell, the mood shifted. It started with a faint sound, a high-pitched whistle that seemed to echo through the trees. At first, they thought it was the wind, but as the hours passed, the whistling grew louder and closer, following a strange tune. The campers joked nervously, claiming it was just a bird. But then, they heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, crunching footsteps that circled their camp. Armed with flashlights, they called out, but no one answered. The whistling stopped, and then a voice, a soft, eerie voice that mimicked one of their own. "Let me in. It's cold out here." Terrified, they stayed inside their tents, trembling until dawn. When the sun rose, they found footprints, bare, human footprints, that led to their campfire, but stopped abruptly, as if the whistler had vanished into thin air. Some say the whistler still roams the woods, drawn to campfires and the scent of fear. If you hear a tune in the night, don't follow it. You might never return. Story 2. The Vanishing Camper. On a cool October evening, a couple set up their tent near an isolated lake. They had the place to themselves, or so they thought. As they roasted marshmallows, they noticed a figure across the lake sitting alone by their own fire. It looked like a man in a hooded jacket, unmoving, staring at them. Feeling uneasy, they decided to ignore it. But every time they glanced across the water, the man seemed closer, without making a sound. By midnight, the figure was gone. Relieved, they went to sleep. But in the middle of the night, they were jolted awake by the sound of their tent zipper sliding open. The man in the hood stood at the entrance, his face obscured. He whispered in a guttural voice, "You shouldn't have ignored me." The couple screamed, but when they turned on their flashlight, he was gone. Not a trace remained, except for muddy footprints leading straight into the lake, disappearing into the water. To this day, locals avoid camping by that lake. They say it's cursed, and those who stay too long might become the next vanishing campers. Story 3. The Shadow in the Tent. A solo camper, Jake, decided to test his survival skills in a remote forest. He packed light, just a tent, some food, and a knife. The first few nights went smoothly, but on the third night, everything changed. As he lay in his tent, the sound of soft breathing filled the air. At first, Jake thought it was his imagination. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside his tent. He held his breath, gripping his knife tightly. The footsteps circled his tent over and over, and then they stopped. Jake peeked out, but no one was there. Relieved, he laid back down. That's when he noticed it. A shadow. The outline of a figure loomed against the thin fabric of his tent, unmoving. The figure didn't speak or move. It just stood there. Jake tried to scream, but his voice caught in his throat. Gathering his courage, he lunged out of the tent, knife in hand, but there was nothing. No tracks, no signs of anyone. Jake packed up and left that night, swearing never to camp alone again. He later learned that the forest was rumored to be haunted by the ghost of a hermit who despised intruders. Story 4. The Campfire Ghost. This next tale comes from a group of friends who went camping in a spot notorious for ghost sightings. The forest was thick and eerily quiet. No birds, no animals, just silence. As they sat around the fire telling stories, one of them noticed a figure in the distance. It was a woman in a long white dress, standing perfectly still. They called out to her, but she didn't respond. Assuming she needed help, 2 of them approached, but as they got closer, the woman vanished. They shrugged it off and returned to their fire. That's when the laughter started. It was faint at first, but it grew louder and more sinister. The flames of their campfire flickered unnaturally, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. And then they saw her again, sitting by the fire, her face pale, her eyes hollow. One by one, the friends ran, leaving their gear behind. The next morning, they returned to find their camp untouched, except for the woman's footprints circling the extinguished fire. Story 5. The Eyes in the Trees. Our next story comes from a park ranger who worked in a dense, remote forest. The ranger often worked late, patrolling the trails after dark. One night, he noticed something strange. Pairs of glowing eyes watching him from the treetops. At first, he assumed they were owls or other animals, but as he walked, the eyes followed him, always staying just out of reach. When he stopped, the eyes would vanish, but as soon as he moved again, they'd reappear. Finally, the ranger called out, demanding whoever or whatever it was to reveal themselves. That's when he heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from all around him. Terrified, he ran back to his truck. As he drove away, he looked in his rearview mirror and saw them, hundreds of glowing eyes staring back at him from the darkness. The ranger never worked a night shift again, and to this day, he warns campers to stay away from that part of the forest after sunset. Story 6. The Silent Stalker. A pair of friends decided to camp in a lesser-known forest trail. It was quiet, almost too quiet, as they pitched their tent. The trees seemed to press in on them, and the air felt heavy. As they settled in, they began to hear faint rustling noises. Soft, deliberate, like someone creeping through the underbrush. They shone their flashlights into the woods, but saw nothing. The noises continued, closer this time, circling their camp. One of them yelled, "Who's there?" But there was no answer. Then the sound stopped altogether. They thought it was over, until they noticed something strange. The forest around them had gone completely silent. No insects, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive stillness. Suddenly, a loud thud hit the side of their tent. They screamed, tumbling out into the cold night air. The flashlight beam caught something. Just for a moment, it was a figure, unnaturally tall, with long, twisted limbs. It stood at the edge of the trees, staring at them with glowing eyes. Then it disappeared into the shadows. The friends left everything behind and ran for their car. They never returned for their gear, and they don't speak of that night to this day. So that's the end of the video. If you're brave enough to keep the fire burning, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button if these stories sent chills down your spine, and click the bell icon so you'll never miss another haunting tale. Have your own spooky campfire story? Share it in the comments, if you dare. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and whatever you do, don't look behind you.